Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little sootier. You wake up in Victorian London and you immediately regret it. Not because of the cold, not because of the hard floor beneath your back, but because there's a foot in your face. It's your brother's foot, and judging by the smell, he hasn't washed it since last Tuesday, or the Tuesday before that. You're not in a bedroom. You're in a room. One room. And you share it with 7 other people, a chamber pot that's already been used twice, and a rat that's been here so long you've started calling him flatmate. This is Victorian London. Not the one from the movies with top hats and gaslit romance. The real one. The one where the air is thick enough to chew, the water wants you dead, and your job might literally dissolve your jawbone. So here's the question. If you woke up here tomorrow, could you make it to dinner? Today, we're finding out exactly how to survive the grimy, choking, disease-ridden nightmare of the 19th century. And trust me, you're going to need a game plan. But before we step into the fog, do me a favor. Hit that like button so more people can discover they'd never survive a single day in history. And subscribe so you don't miss next week's survival guide. Because trust me, it gets worse. Now hold your breath. We're going in. You open your eyes, and for a brief, merciful second, you forget where you are. Then the smell hits you, a thick, ancient odor of unwashed bodies, damp wool, and the sharp tang of the bucket in the corner that someone forgot to empty last night. You're not alone. You're never alone. Inches from your face, your brother's foot twitches in some dream you don't want to know about. On your other side, your mother snores softly, her arm draped over your youngest sister. Across the room, 2 neighbors you don't really know, but can't really avoid, are curled against the wall like mismatched spoons. 7 people. 1 room. And somehow, by unspoken agreement, no one talks about what happens after dark when the candle burns out and the only sounds are breathing and the creak of floorboards. This room is everything. It's your bedroom, your kitchen, your living room, and your bathroom. Though you try not to think too hard about that last one. The bed you're lying on isn't really a bed. It's a straw mattress stuffed with whatever the landlord could find. Hay, old rags. Possibly someone's forgotten coat. It crackles when you move. It stinks when it's damp. And it's alive. Not with anything you want to meet, but with things that crawl and bite and leave marks on your skin by morning. You share it with whoever else claimed a spot before you fell asleep. Privacy is a concept for rich people. Here, you learn to sleep lightly and keep your hands to yourself. The pillow under your head is a sack stuffed with something that might have been wool once. Now it's just a lumpy reminder that comfort is a luxury you can't afford. The blanket is thin wool, scratchy against your neck, and it hasn't been washed since before you were born, probably longer. It smells like every person who's ever used it, a layered history of sweat and sickness and secrets. You pull it tighter anyway. The cold seeps through the walls like it lives here too. The floor groans beneath you when you shift weight. You know which boards to avoid, which ones scream loud enough to wake the whole room. The ones that don't scream are the ones hiding gaps where the cold air rushes up from below, carrying the breath of the street and whatever's rotting in the cellar. The walls are patched with newspaper and desperation. Wallpaper is a rumor. Paint is a fantasy. What you have is bare wood, stained dark by years of coal smoke and damp, covered in places with pages from last year's penny dreadfuls, stories of murder and mystery to read by the single candle you're allowed each night. The window is a joke. It's so thick with grime that light barely passes through, and when it does, it's grey and sickly, like the sky itself is ill. The glass rattles in its frame when the wind blows, and the wind always blows. You've stuffed rags around the edges, but the draft finds its way in anyway, curling around your ankles like it owns the place. The view, if you could see it, is an alley where the butcher dumps his scraps and your neighbour keeps a goat that screams at dawn. You don't open the window. Nothing good comes from opening the window. That bucket in the corner, the one everyone pretends not to notice, is the room's darkest secret. By day, it's a toilet. By night, it's a hazard. Someone always knocks it over in the dark, and when they do, no one yells. No one blames. You just clean it up in silence, because tomorrow night it could be you. The smell is permanent now, soaked into the floorboards, woven into the walls, part of the room's identity. You stopped noticing it years ago. Visitors notice. You don't get many visitors. And yet, despite everything, this room is home. You know which corner drips when it rains. You know which floorboard hides the loose coin your father stashed last year. You know the sound of your neighbor's breathing, the rhythm of your mother's cough, the way your little sister talks in her sleep about things you pretend not to hear. There's a strange intimacy in this closeness, a forced, uncomfortable knowledge of each other's bodies and habits and secrets. You've seen things in this room that would shock strangers. You've heard things that would make a dock worker blush, but no one talks about them. In Victorian London, survival means learning what to ignore. The room prepares you for the day ahead by making you suffer just enough to appreciate the streets. Because as bad as this room is, outside is worse. The fog is waiting, the streets are waiting, and they don't care that you haven't had breakfast. They don't care that you barely slept. They're hungry too, and you're just another body to chew up and spit out. So you swing your legs over the edge of the mattress, you find your boots in the dark, and you prepare to face a city that wants to kill you. But first, you check the bucket. Always check the bucket. You step out the door, and the world disappears. One moment you're standing on your own threshold, the next you're blind, swallowed whole by something that isn't quite fog and isn't quite smoke, but sits somewhere between the two, like a punishment invented specifically for your lungs. This is the London particular, though no one calls it that here. Here it's just Tuesday. It's the colour of old tea stained with something darker, something that might have been alive once. It curls around your ankles like it's sizing you up. It fills your mouth with the taste of burnt coal and wet wool, and the faint metallic hint of factory runoff. You cough. Everyone coughs. It's the city's unofficial greeting. You can't see 3 feet ahead, maybe 2. The street you've crossed 1,000 times is suddenly a foreign country. Shapes emerge from the grey without warning. A cart, a horse, a man whose face you don't recognize until he's close enough to touch. You step aside. He steps aside. You both mutter apologies to the empty air, because neither of you can see well enough to know if the other is still there. The gas lamps burn all day long, weak orange blurs in the murk, doing absolutely nothing to help. You navigate by sound, hooves on cobblestones, wheels creaking, the ever-present chorus of coughing that surrounds you like a soundtrack to someone else's tragedy. The smell deserves its own warning. It's a complex thing, layered and patient. At the base, coal smoke, thousands of chimneys emptying their lungs into the same air you're trying to breathe. Above that, the river, low tide, exposing mudflats that have been soaking up the city's waste for centuries. Then horse manure, fresh and old mixed together, ground fine by cartwheels and mixed into a paste that coats everything. Sewage vapor, rising from gutters and overflowing privies. And underneath it all, something organic, something rotting, something you decide not to identify, because knowing wouldn't help you breathe any easier. This is the air of empire. This is progress, filtered through 1,000,000 lungs and returned to the sky darker than it arrived. You pull your collar up, but it doesn't help. The fog gets everywhere. It seeps through wool, through skin, through the cracks in your resolve. Your eyes water, your throat burns. By noon you'll be coughing up streaks of grey that you pretend not to notice. By nightfall, your shirt will be stiff with what the air left behind. Children play in the streets between coughing fits, their faces streaked with soot, their laughter wet and rattling. Old men lean against walls and hack until their bodies shake, then light pipes and inhale more, because what else is there to do? The doctors call it bronchitis, consumption, the London cough. They recommend country air, which is about as useful as recommending a private carriage and a month in the countryside. You breathe what you're given. You cough until you can't. Then you keep coughing. The fog doesn't lift so much as thin, grudgingly, around midday, revealing a world painted entirely in shades of grey. Buildings loom like ghosts of themselves. The street is a river of mud and filth. A horse stands motionless, head down, resigned to the atmosphere. A woman picks her way across the road with a basket over her face, as if that might filter something. It won't. Nothing filters this. You've given up trying. You just breathe and cough and carry on, because carrying on is what people do here. They don't complain about the fog. They don't remark on the smell. This is London. This is life. And if the air itself is trying to kill you, well, at least you're not alone in dying. You move forward, one hand on the wall, eyes squinted against the stinging grey. Somewhere ahead is the market, or work, or maybe just another street that looks exactly like this one. You'll know when you get there, assuming you don't walk into a lamppost first. Something moves in the grey to your left. You tense. It's just a woman, arms full of laundry, her face hidden behind a shawl. She passes without a word. The fog swallows her whole. To your right, footsteps approach and fade without ever becoming a person. The city is full of ghosts today, and you're one of them, drifting through the murk with no destination except forward. Then you hear it, the clatter of hooves too close, the shout of a driver who can't see any better than you can. You jump back just as a cart emerges from the fog like a nightmare given form, its wheels missing you by inches. The driver yells something foul and disappears back into the grey. Your heart hammers against your ribs. That was close. That was too close. You stand there for a moment, catching your breath, tasting blood and soot and the sharp edge of fear. The fog swirls around you, indifferent. It doesn't care that you almost died. It doesn't care about anything except being exactly what it is, thick, toxic, and absolutely everywhere. You keep walking. What else can you do? The day is young, and the city is hungry. The fog will lift eventually, or it won't, and either way, you'll be here, breathing, coughing, surviving. A man passes with a handkerchief pressed to his mouth. It comes away stained. He doesn't look surprised. Neither do you. This is London. This is what it means to be alive here. You breathe through your mouth, because your nose gave up hours ago. You keep one hand on the wall and one eye on the grey. And you move forward, because standing still in this fog means letting it settle on you, claim you, make you part of its endless grey procession. By afternoon, the fog will thin just enough to remind you what sunlight looks like. By evening, it'll be back, thicker than before, curling through door cracks and settling over the city like a blanket made of sickness. But that's later. Right now, there's only the grey, the cough, the careful shuffle of feet on slick cobblestones. There's only survival, measured one step at a time, one breath at a time, through air that tastes like dying and feels like home. Because this is Victorian London, and the fog isn't weather. It's a condition of existence. It's in you now, settled deep, and it's not leaving until you do. Your stomach announces itself with a growl that turns heads. You ignore them. They ignore you. That's the arrangement here. You pretend not to notice each other's noises, each other's smells, each other's desperate little hungers. But the growl is insistent, and you haven't eaten since yesterday's crust. And yesterday's crust was so hard you had to soak it in tea for an hour just to bite through. So now you're hungry. Properly hungry. The kind of hungry that makes your hands shake and your thoughts drift to places you'd rather not visit. Breakfast in Victorian London isn't a meal. It's a negotiation with despair. You have a few pennies in your pocket, if you're lucky, and those pennies have to cover food, rent, and the vague hope that tomorrow might be better. So you spend carefully, you spend wisely, and you spend on things that would make a modern stomach turn inside out. First, bread. Always bread. It's cheap, it's filling, and it's everywhere. But this isn't the soft sliced bread you're used to. This is bread made with cheap flour, often adulterated with alum to make it whiter, or ground bones to add weight, or even chalk because chalk is cheap and looks like flour if you squint. You bite into it and taste nothing but grain and desperation. It's dense, it's heavy, it sits in your stomach like a stone and gives you just enough energy to keep moving, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. Then there's tea. You'll drink tea because everyone drinks tea, and because boiling the water might kill whatever's swimming in it. The leaves are cheap, reused until they're pale and sad, stretched with additives that give them colour without flavour. You add milk if you can afford it, but milk is dangerous. It comes from cows kept in city sheds, fed on brewery waste, milked into buckets that rarely see soap. It's often watered down by the seller, then watered again by the middleman, then treated with formaldehyde to keep it from spoiling before it reaches you. Formaldehyde. They add it to milk to stop it from going bad, and you drink it because the alternative is no milk at all. You don't think about what formaldehyde does to a body, you just drink. If you're feeling flush, you might buy a pie from a street vendor. The pies are hot, cheap, and smell incredible after a morning in the fog. But here's the thing about those pies. You don't know what's in them. The vendor says meat. The vendor always says meat. But meat costs money, and money is tight, and there are plenty of things that look like meat if you chop them fine enough and drown them in gravy. Rats, for instance. Cats. Dogs. Things that died in the street and were scooped up before the cart came. You've heard stories. Everyone's heard stories. You eat the pie anyway because hunger doesn't care about stories. You chew and swallow and tell yourself it's beef. It tastes like beef mostly. Close enough. You keep eating. The street is full of food, if you know where to look. Vendors line the pavements with trays of fried fish, baked potatoes, roasted chestnuts, eels in jelly. The eels are a delicacy apparently. They're also eels, pulled from the Thames, which is where everything ends up. You've seen the Thames. You know what's in it. But eels are cheap and filling, so you eat them and try not to think about where they've been. The jelly is there to distract you. It doesn't work, but you appreciate the effort. Children dart between the crowds with baskets of watercress, shouting prices, their faces pinched and hungry, even as they sell food they can't afford to eat. You buy a bunch because it's green and fresh, and maybe today you'll survive on something that isn't ground bone and mystery meat. The watercress is gritty with dust from the street, but you wipe it on your sleeve and chew anyway. It tastes like living. It tastes like the countryside you've never seen. Some people don't buy food. Some people queue at the workhouse gates for a ladle of gruel, a grey watery sludge that fills the stomach without nourishing anything. It's warm. That's its only virtue. You eat it standing in the rain, spoonless, using bread that's more chalk than flour to soak up the liquid. The workhouse offers this for free, which means it costs you everything, your dignity, your freedom, your name. But you eat it because the alternative is nothing, and nothing doesn't keep you alive. Back on the street, you pass a woman selling hot potatoes from a brazier. The smell makes your mouth water. You've already spent your penny on bread, so you keep walking, but the smell follows you, taunting you, reminding you that pleasure is something other people have. A man beside you buys one, splits it open with his thumbs, and the steam rises like a ghost. He eats it plain, no butter, no salt, and the look on his face is almost sexual. Eyes half closed, lips parted, a soft moan escaping as the warmth hits his empty stomach. You look away. Some things are too intimate to witness. The hunger doesn't stop. It's always there, a dull ache beneath your ribs, a constant companion. You learn to live with it, to work around it, to distract yourself with the business of survival. But at night, when you're lying on that straw mattress with 7 other bodies breathing around you, the hunger talks to you. It whispers about the pie you didn't buy, the potato you couldn't afford, the bread that's already gone. It tells you that tomorrow might be worse. It's usually right. You eat fast, because the factory whistle will blow soon, and being late means losing a day's pay. You eat standing, because there's nowhere to sit, and you try not to think about what you just put in your body. The day is young. The work is hard, and the pie sits in your stomach like a promise you're not sure you can keep. You're still tasting that pie, the one with the meat you're trying very hard not to think about, when the street swallows you whole. One moment you're walking, the next you're part of a current, a river of bodies flowing through the narrow canyon of buildings, all moving somewhere with purpose and desperation. The fog still lingers at the edges, but here in the thick of it, the crowd creates its own weather, warm breath, stale sweat, the collective exhalation of a city that never stops moving. The street itself is a battlefield disguised as a thoroughfare. There are no sidewalks, not really, just narrow strips of raised stone that everyone ignores because there's no room to use them. You walk in the road because that's where the walking happens, which means you walk where the carts roll, where the horses shit, where the wheels churn the mud into a brown slurry that splashes your ankles with every step. The mud isn't just mud, it's everything. Horse manure ground fine by iron wheels, kitchen grease thrown from windows, the contents of chamber pots emptied during the night and never quite washed away, rotting vegetables from yesterday's market, dead things, small and large, trodden into the mix until they're just part of the texture. You step in it again. By noon, your boots are a different color. By evening, you've stopped noticing the smell. Crossing the street requires a death wish or excellent reflexes, preferably both. Carts appear from nowhere, their drivers shouting warnings that arrive too late. Omnibuses, those lumbering horse-drawn buses, cut corners so tight they clip pedestrians and keep going. A woman beside you barely jumps back as a wheel misses her skirts by inches. She doesn't scream, she doesn't swear, she just keeps walking, because what would be the point? This happens 20 times a day. You learn to move, or you learn to die. The horses themselves are hazards, massive, tired animals that spook at nothing and crush whatever's in their path when they do. You watch their feet, you watch their eyes. You watch the drivers who are watching everything except you. The gutters run down the middle of the street like open wounds, carrying the city's waste toward the river. You have to cross them to get anywhere, which means stepping over or through whatever's flowing at that moment. Sometimes it's just brown water. Sometimes it's thicker. Sometimes things float past that you pretend not to recognize. The trick is not to look down. The trick is to step quickly and hope your boots are waterproof, which they aren't. The trick is to accept that by the end of the day, your feet will be wet with something that isn't water, and you'll just have to live with that. The people are their own kind of danger. The street is crowded because it has to be. 6 million people need to move, and this is how they move. You're pressed against bodies constantly, strangers' elbows in your ribs, strangers' breath on your neck. Pickpockets love this. They move through the crowd like fish through water, their hands light and quick, lifting handkerchiefs, watches, purses, anything not nailed down. You feel a tug at your coat and spin around, but the face behind you is innocent, confused, already gone. Your pocket is lighter. You curse. You move on. There's no police officer to tell, and if there were, he'd probably just laugh. The vendors add to the chaos. They line the edges of the street with their carts and barrows, screaming about their wares in voices hoarse from years of screaming. Hot eels, fresh oysters, watercress, potatoes, ballads, brooms. Anything you could want, they're selling it, and they're selling it now, and they'll grab your sleeve to make sure you know it. A woman thrusts a bunch of watercress in your face, her nails dirty, her eyes desperate. You push past. A man waves a broadsheet with headlines about murder, the latest sensational killing that everyone's whispering about. You don't buy it. You don't need to. The murder is probably happening somewhere nearby anyway. The smells here are overwhelming, a symphony of filth that changes with every step. Here, the sharp tang of fresh horse manure. Here, the sweet rot of overripe fruit. Here, the greasy smoke of a fried fish stall. Here, the unmistakable stench of a public privy that hasn't been cleaned since last month. Here, the perfume of a lady passing, her scent struggling against the onslaught and losing badly. Your nose gives up eventually. It just stops trying to categorize and accepts everything at once. This is what London smells like. This is what you smell like now too. Children dart between the legs of adults like they're playing a game, which maybe they are. They're thin, most of them, with faces aged beyond their years and eyes that have seen too much. Some work, selling matches, running messages, sweeping crossings clean in hopes of a penny. Some just survive, existing on the margins, watching for opportunity or trouble. A boy no older than 8 approaches with an outstretched hand, his expression knowing, almost adult. You ignore him. He ignores your ignoring and moves to the next mark. This is how it works. This is how it's always worked. A woman catches your eye from a doorway. She's young, or was young once, dressed in clothes that might have been fine last year. Her look is direct, appraising, full of calculation. You look away quickly because you know what she's selling, and you know you can't afford it, even if you wanted to, which you don't, which you tell yourself firmly as you push through the crowd. But her eyes follow you, and you feel them on your back long after you've passed. The street narrows ahead, funneling the crowd into a bottleneck where the buildings lean toward each other like they're sharing secrets. Here, the press is tightest, bodies crushed together, moving as one organism. You feel heat from the person in front of you, smell what they ate yesterday, hear their breathing shallow and quick. A woman behind you gasps as someone's hand finds her in the crush. You can't see who. You can't see anything except the backs of heads and the walls closing in. The crowd carries you forward, helpless, part of something larger than yourself. Then you're through, spat out into a slightly wider space, gasping for air that isn't someone else's. You check your pockets. Everything's still there, miraculously. You breathe. You move on. The street never stops, never rests, never offers a moment of peace. This is just the journey to work. This is just Tuesday. And somewhere ahead, the factory whistle blows, calling you to a different kind of survival. The factory whistle cuts through the fog like a blade, shrill and insistent, calling you to something that isn't quite work and isn't quite slavery, but lives somewhere in the grey space between. You follow the crowd because that's what you do, because stopping means starving, because the whistle owns you now and will own you until the day it doesn't, which will probably be the day you die. The building looms ahead, brick stained black by decades of smoke, windows like empty eyes, a chimney that coughs soot into the air you're already choking on. This is where you'll spend the next 14 hours. This is where you'll earn tomorrow's bread. You file in with the others, hundreds of them, faces blank with the particular exhaustion of people who haven't slept enough and won't sleep again for another 14 hours. The noise hits first, a wall of sound so thick you feel it in your chest, the clatter of machinery, the hiss of steam, the endless rhythmic pounding of looms and presses and hammers. Men shout over it and can't hear themselves. You'll learn to read lips by noon. By next week, you'll have forgotten what silence sounds like. The air inside is worse than the fog outside, which is an achievement you wouldn't have thought possible. It's thick with cotton dust, or coal dust, or metal shavings, depending on which floor you work on, and you breathe it anyway, because breathing is mandatory and complaining is not. Your lungs will be black by 30 if you live that long. Most don't. But most don't think about that, because thinking about that means stopping, and stopping means losing your place. And losing your place means someone else takes it before the whistle stops echoing. The machines don't care about you. This is the first lesson and the only one that matters. They're hungry in a way that flesh can't understand, all metal teeth and moving parts, and they'll eat you as soon as look at you. You've seen it happen. A woman 2 looms down, her hair caught, her scalp torn before anyone could reach the stop lever. She didn't scream. There wasn't time. The machine just kept working, because that's what machines do, and someone else was at her station by afternoon, because that's what factories do. You watch your fingers. You watch your sleeves. You watch the loose threads and the flying shuttles and the belts that snap without warning. You learn to be afraid, and then you learn to work through the fear, because fear doesn't pay. The overseer walks the floor with eyes that miss nothing. He's paid to miss nothing. His stick taps against the floor as he moves, a rhythm you learn to track even over the noise, because when the tapping stops near you, something's wrong. He doesn't speak, he points. If you're slowing down, he points at the machine, and then at you, and you work faster. If you're sick, he points at the door, and you leave, and someone else takes your place before you've made it to the street. There's no sick leave. There's no mercy. There's just production, measured in yards of cloth, or tons of coal, or dozens of boxes, and you're just the thing that makes it happen. The children work beside you because children are cheap and small and can fit where adults can't. They crawl under machines to clear jams while the machines are still running because stopping costs money. You've seen them emerge with fewer fingers than they went in with. You've seen them not emerge at all. The overseer doesn't stop production for that either. There's always another child. There's always another desperate family willing to send their youngest into the jaws for a few pennies a day. You try not to look at them. You try not to think about what their nights must be like, those small bodies lying in rooms like yours, dreaming of machines that eat. The heat is its own punishment. In summer, the factory becomes an oven, bricks holding the sun's warmth long after it's gone, machinery radiating its own fever. Men strip to the waist, women roll their sleeves and unbutton collars, and everyone sweats into the product. By the end of your shift, your clothes cling like a second skin, soaked through with salt and effort, and the particular damp of bodies pressed too close for too long. In winter, it's worse. The windows don't close properly. The heat from the machines wars with the cold from outside, and you shiver and sweat at the same time. Your body confused, your bones aching with something that feels like aging sped up. The hours stretch like taffy, each one longer than the last. You watch the light through those grimy windows shift from grey to grey, never quite brightening, never quite fading, just existing in permanent twilight. You mark time by the whistle. The first whistle, start. The second, midday, though you don't stop because stopping means losing money. The third, end, though end is so far away you can't imagine it yet. You work. You keep working. You forget why you're working, just that you must, just that stopping isn't an option, just that this is what life is now. The woman beside you catches your eye. She's young, maybe 20, with a smear of grease across her cheek and eyes that have already learned to hide everything. Her hands move automatically, feeding thread into the machine, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm. She doesn't smile. No one smiles here. But she looks at you a moment longer than necessary, and something passes between you. Recognition, maybe, or the ghost of connection in a place designed to kill it. Then the overseer's stick taps nearby, and you both look away, back to your machines, back to your work, back to the endless repetition that fills your days until there's nothing left. The afternoon wears on. Your back screams. Your eyes burn from the dust and the strain of focusing in bad light. Your fingers are raw, split at the tips, stained with something that won't wash off. You need the privy but can't go, because going means losing time, and losing time means losing money, and losing money means no bread tomorrow. So you hold it. Everyone holds it. The floor smells of sweat and oil, and the faint ammonia of bodies pushed past their limits. You add your own to the mix and pretend not to notice. A man near you collapses, just drops, mid-motion, like a puppet with cut strings. The machine keeps running. The overseer appears, taps him with his stick, then gestures to two others who drag him toward the door. No one stops working. No one asks if he's alive. The machine beside his keeps running, and someone else will run it tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, until they collapse too. This is the rhythm. This is the trade. You give your body to the machine, and the machine gives you just enough to keep giving. The final whistle comes like a gift you don't deserve. The machines wind down, the noise subsides to a dull roar, and you stumble toward the door with the rest of them, a river of exhausted bodies flowing back into the fog. Your legs shake. Your head pounds. Your hands won't stop trembling. But you're alive, which is more than some can say, and you have pennies in your pocket, which is more than others. You step into the grey evening, into air that tastes like dying, and you start the walk back to that room, that bucket, that bed you share with 7 strangers. Tomorrow you'll do it again, and again, and again, until you can't.